Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has put the country's 1.3 billion people under a 21-day lockdown.
हिंदुस्तान को बचाने के लिए, हिंदुस्तान के हर नागरिक को बचाने के लिए, आपको बचाने के लिए, आपके परिवार को बचाने के लिए आज रात 12 बजे से घरों से बाहर निकलने पर पूरी तरह पाबंदी लगाई जा रही है.
But the whole country had only 4 hours notice, triggering panic and migration across the country.
In a country like India, which has such a large informal economy and such a huge number of migrant workers, you can't possibly expect that if you shut the country down entirely for 3 weeks that everyone will dutifully shelter in place and stay inside. We had these horrific scenes of large numbers of crowds of Indian migrants literally trying to walk dozens if not hundreds of miles home.
India's migrant workers work in big cities but come from rural areas, and their numbers are not just in the few hundreds or thousands. They form 1/5 of the country's workforce and generally live in crowded and unsanitary conditions with no social security.
So from a public health perspective, the lockdown makes a lot of sense. However, clearly the Indian government did not properly plan for the consequences.
प्रॉब्लम में यही है 21 तारीख को कंपनी बंद हो गई, वहाँ से मकान मालिक भगा रहा, बोल रहा कि मैं यहाँ न रुकने दूंगी, 3 महीना कंपनी बंद हो रही है, तो यहाँ इसीलिए मैं प्रॉब्लम हुआ, इसीलिए मैं भागी आए वहाँ से. ठीक है, 3 दिन मेरे को चलते चलते हो गए हैं, 7 लोगों को. हम लोग बहुत परेशान हो रहे हैं. अब मेरे लोगों को क्यों नहीं रोक कर रहे हो, क्यों नहीं जाने देना रहे हो?
The nationwide shutdown left most of these people stranded, walking en masse on highways, possibly exposing them to the virus and making them potential carriers to their villages.
You had a very ironic and tragic result that the very public health risks that the lockdown was meant to reduce are in fact much more pronounced now. And the more they're on the streets, the longer they're on the streets, they are contributing to the spread of the virus.
Even though authorities have set up soup kitchens and shelters for the homeless, they are not enough to meet the overwhelming numbers.
बीमारी से मरना मंजूर है, लेकिन भूख से मरना मंजूर नहीं है. दिन भर में कभी 1 रोटी मिल जाती, कभी 2 रोटी मिल जाती, कभी थोड़ा सा चावल मिल जाता है. इसमें कैसे गुजारा हुआ?
मजदूरी भी रुक गई 2 महीने की. रूम मालिक भगा दिया, खर्चा भी नहीं दे रहा है रूम मालिक खाने का. 22 तारीख से बंद कर दिया.
Authorities have also pledged a $23 billion welfare package to help the poor and unemployed. But to likely get access to the benefits, they'll first have to go through the bureaucratic hurdles. There have been disturbing videos of baton-wielding police humiliating and beating those who breached the lockdown. Another video showed migrant workers being hosed down with a disinfectant by men in protective suits. At least 22 migrants have lost their lives during their arduous journeys, some in accidents and others due to exhaustion.
My top focus tonight is on the mass exodus that we are seeing from India's big cities back to the villages.
लेकिन हम यहाँ देख रहे हैं कि सड़कों पर अभी भी लोग पैदल चल रहे हैं और उन लोगों में छोटे-छोटे बच्चे भी शामिल हैं.
मैं इस वक्त हम लोगों ने कोशिश की कुछ और लोगों के साथ मिलकर कि थोड़ा ड्राई राशन किट्स बनाया जा सके ताकि जो मजदूर यहाँ भारी तादाद में जा रहे हैं लगातार उन लोगों तक जाकर पहुँचाया जा सके. तो
So far, more than 1,000 cases of coronavirus have been registered in India with more than 50 deaths. Experts say India lost good lead time when China shared its concerns and after the first coronavirus death was reported in India in January.
A pandemic needed 3 months to go around the world, and see where we are now. We would have been better off if we had taken it seriously in early January.
The country has overstretched its public health infrastructure, and a local community transmission can be apocalyptic. There's one state-run hospital for every 55,591 people on average, and 0.5 hospital beds for every 1,000 people, compared to 4.3 in China and 3.2 in Italy. One isolation bed per 84,000 Indians, one quarantine bed per 36,000 Indians, and just 40,000 ventilators for 1.37 billion people. It needs about 10 times more doctors to meet the norms prescribed by the World Health Organization. There's a shortfall of at least 500,000 doctors.
So I would argue that this is one of Modi's signature bold moves where you make a sudden dramatic decision and yet you don't really plan things out in advance and plan for the consequences. It reminds me a lot of the demonetization decision on the part of the Modi government to suddenly announce that huge numbers of banknotes were going to go out of circulation, but without warning people. in a country where so many people are dependent on cash. Now, though, the stakes are much higher than they were with demonetization. We're looking at a case of a global pandemic, not a simple policy move on monetary issues.
So how will India mitigate the COVID-19 crisis?